It's been almost a year since I moved in with my roommate, and things were mostly chill, at least at first. We were both in our mid-20s, trying to make ends meet in a small city apartment. I knew about his schizophrenia, but he was on meds and seemed pretty stable. He was quiet, kept to himself, and it felt like I was living alone most of the time. But then, things started to change. It began with small stuff. I'd noticed things out of place in the apartment. My books moved. The remote not where I left it. Nothing major, just little annoyances. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just being careless. But then, it got weirder. My roommate would stare off into space, mumbling to himself. Sometimes he'd have full-blown conversations with no one there. I could hear him through the thin walls, talking about people who didn't exist, places we'd never been. It was unsettling, but I figured it was part of his condition, and he seemed harmless enough. The real weirdness started a few months in. I'd be in my room, reading or trying to sleep, and hear footsteps in the hall. Not just the usual creaks, but deliberate steps, slow and heavy. They'd stop right outside my door. My heart would race, and I'd listen, holding my breath. But nothing would happen. No knock, no voice, just silence. When I'd finally muster the courage to open the door, there'd be no one there. Just the empty hallway staring back at me. One night I woke up to a strange noise. It was this faint scratching sound, like nails on a chalkboard. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. It was coming from my roommate's room. I tiptoed to his door, pressed my ear against it, and heard him whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was frantic, desperate. I knocked, asking if he was okay, but he didn't respond. The scratching stopped, and all I heard was his breathing. It was unsettling, but again, I told myself it was just his illness acting up. Then came the night I'll never forget. The night everything spiraled out of control. It started like any other. I was in my room scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I heard my roommate's door open. The sound sent a chill down my spine, and I instinctively locked my door. I always kept it shut when he was around. It made me feel safer. I lay there, trying to ignore the creeping unease, and eventually, I must have fallen asleep. I woke up suddenly with this intense feeling of dread. My room was pitch black, the air heavy. My eyes darted around, trying to adjust to the darkness, and that's when I noticed it. My door was open. Just a crack, but enough to see a sliver of the dimly lit hallway. My heart jumped into my throat. I knew I had locked it. I always locked it. For a moment, I just lay there, paralyzed. I didn't want to move, didn't want to breathe, but I had to know. I slowly got out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and crept towards the door. I peeked through the crack, and there he was, my roommate, standing in the hallway. He was facing toward me, his back hunched, hands at his sides. But something was off. He wasn't just standing, he was swaying, ever so slightly, like he was in a trance. I was about to call out to him, ask if he was okay, when he did something that still haunts me. He slowly lifted one hand and started bending his fingers backward, one by one. The soft, sickening sound of cracking echoed in the quiet apartment. My stomach turned as I realized he was breaking his own fingers, deliberately, methodically. He was whispering too, but it wasn't words this time. It was more like chanting. I couldn't make out the sounds, but they felt wrong, like they didn't belong. The sight and sound combined were horrific, a disturbing ritual that left me frozen in place. My skin crawled, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I backed away, terrified he'd notice me, and carefully shut the door. I locked it again, double-checked, and then just stood there, trying to calm down. What the hell was he doing? Was he sleepwalking? Or was it something else? I didn't get much sleep after that. I lay in bed, listening for any sound, any sign of movement, but it was quiet, too quiet. When morning finally came, I cautiously opened my door. The hallway was empty, and my roommate's door was shut. I knocked, gently at first, then louder. No answer. I tried the handle, but it was locked. It was like he vanished. His room was locked, and he didn't come out. After a couple of days, I called his family. They came over, concerned, and unlocked his door. The room was empty, aside from the mess he left. No sign of him anywhere. The police were called, and they searched the apartment, the building, the neighborhood. Nothing. It was like he just disappeared into thin air. I don't know what happened to my roommate. The police eventually stopped looking, chalking it up to a missing person case. His family was devastated, and I was left with this gnawing sense of unease, those strange sounds. I've tried to move on, but I still wonder what I saw that night. Was it just a manifestation of his illness? A moment of madness? Or was it something more? Something darker? I'll probably never know. But every so often, when I'm passing by our old apartment, I swear I can see him standing in the window of his old bedroom, staring at me.